we had an opportunity while at Midco as we were deploying Net Promoter System across the operation. We looked at a group of customers and we sent them a brand relationship survey. It was about 5,000 customers we sent it to. We got about a little over 1,000 back, and our score in that moment with customers we hadn't spoken to in well over a year was a minus 52. I mean, that'll leave a mark. When the CEO says that, sees that, he's like, "What are we doing here?" And so I said, that's what we expected. Now let's take that same sample of customers and let's watch them over the next 6 months. And any customer we had an interaction with, let's then send them that same brand survey. And so after about 5 months of marinating, we got that result back and we had surveys come in about 400 accounts and the score flipped to a positive 56.
Welcome to the CX Files, Corey. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Look forward to it.
So I love to ask people, just to get started, looking back a little bit, what were some of your first experiences like in customer operations? What were some things that stood out to you, first impressions?
Yeah, you know, I started out on the front line, and I think that really helped shape just kind of being able to roll up the sleeves and engage with customers and being that close to the customers. I've always held that near and dear. But it also helped me know that you have to be wildly creative. You have to be
Hmm.
incredibly resourceful, especially in
Hmm.
the customer care game. And in the space where I've been in telecommunications and broadband and technology, I think sometimes our industries sometimes get a bad rap in that customer care or customer experience is a necessary evil. And so if you really
Hmm.
want to excel in an organization on a case by case basis, you have to be resourceful. Then if you want to take it up to the next level and kind of begin to define strategy and really lead organizations, you have to be not just resourceful and creative, but crafty to get people
Hmm.
on board with why really the competitive differentiator is the customer experience. Yes, we spend a lot of money on technology. Yes, we spend a lot of money on the network, but so does everyone else. And so customer experience is where it happens. So I think that has really shaped my career by being very close to the customer and being very resourceful to get things done.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a kind of, this idea that support is just a cost.
Hmm.
There's some inertia in this idea, and I think it's always competing with the all the other priorities of the business, right? And it's really easy for sales to say, "Hey, look at how much money we made," or marketing to say, "Hey, look at how many customers we brought in," and so on for the different departments. Obviously, if you have an engineering
Hmm.
department or a
Hmm.
product department or something, right? And support, kind of is somewhere down on the list,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's starting to change. But what are some of the things that you found were kind of levers that you
Mm.
could pull or ways to gain leverage to kind of change that perception?
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of the story of my career and the arc that when it happened. So I had an opportunity to lead a Midwest operator, about 500,000 customers throughout the Midwest, Midco. Great organization, and wonderful opportunity, really. But it was an engineering-driven firm when I arrived, and as a customer care kind of customer experience operation person, when big issues would happen on the network or there'd be some underlying factor that was causing issues, customer care would be invited to the meeting, but it was almost like it was the police officers leading you around the traffic. Like there's nothing to see here, customer care, just move on. We'll call you when you're needed. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
arrived there, it was driven by that, and so that kind of customer care necessary evil. But it was given the remit by the chief operating officer to bring CX strategy into the DNA of the organization. And what I recognized quickly was this thought, and this is not agnostic, or it is, I think any industry you'll see this, where it's not my job. Right. I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to have the greatest technology in the world, or I have marketing, or I have sales. What happens after that, that's your job. But it can be argued, and it should be argued, that it's everybody's job. And so I really had to break it down to very relatable principles to kind of get everybody to understand that no matter what you do, downstream, near or far, you're going to impact the customer experience. And so we really thought about it in a way that, we got to break it down to four basic, simple principles that everyone follows. And I would argue both in personal life as well as professional. And it comes down to the first principle that you do when engaging customers or running a business is about trust and transparency. I would say that's the same thing if you're married. You want to keep a healthy marriage, it's about trust and transparency. And you learn your lessons along the way, but it's about setting the right expectations. And so, anybody in the organization, with communication as a great example, um, in our industry, we always battle with rate increases, right? Rate increases happen on a regular basis. Video programming, it goes up. I love sports. I love the NFL. I love all sports. But because of that, rates go up. Those athletes are getting paid big money. And so years ago, we had a situation in the industry where the local broadcasters began to be able to charge what is called retransmission fees, right? So as an operator, you pass that through to the customers. Well, they went from 35 cents to like $19 in the span of a couple of years. And the
Wow.
industry was always frightened to death to speak the truth. And so
Mm,
when I arrived at Midco, I said, there's no reason we shouldn't tell our customers exactly what this is. If anything, they will enjoy having someone speak the truth. That builds trust. They may not like what they're getting as an answer, but it's about trust and being transparent. And then when you think, especially in the technology space, a really important principle is about being proactive because everything we do in customer care, customer service is reactive. Everything. That's
right.
what it's built
Right.
on. It breaks, we fixes it. That's our value proposition. But if you really want to get ahead of the curve, you're fixing problems before they happen, before customers notice they're happening. And so the idea of being proactive versus reactive. In our system, and we're not a huge provider, Hiawatha Broadband has about 20 or 30,000 customers, and we have all these devices out there that are talking to us all day long, telling us how they feel. The customers doesn't know there may be an impairment. We know, and we need to get in front of those things and fix them before they become a problem. Absolutely critical. And you can say that in billing and how, if you have a sale with a customer, you want to make sure that you're ticking and tying. And if you see something that they may have missed, maybe a value laden offer that they could take more advantage of, reach out to them. That'll build that trust, but you'll be proactive. And then I think another critical one, and this speaks to the massive amounts of technology we are all drinking in from the fire hose called AI. Um, you know, it is imperative that you create a detectable human fingerprint on every interaction
Mm,
you have with the customer. And to prove that out, you need data to prove it, right? So I think some of our challenges in CX is we're looked at as a necessary evil because we can't prove our value to the organization. Well,
right.
we had an opportunity while at Midco as we were deploying Net Promoter System across the operation. We looked at a group of customers and we sent them a brand relationship survey. It was about 5,000 customers we sent it to. We got about a little over 1,000 back, and our score in that moment with customers we hadn't spoken to in well over a year was a minus 52. I mean, that'll leave a mark. When the CEO sees that, he's like, "What are we doing here?" And so I said, that's what we kind of expected. Now let's take that same sample of customers and let's watch them over the next 6 months. And any customer we had an interaction with, let's then send them that same brand survey. And so after about 5 months of marinating, we got that result back, and we had surveys come in about 400 accounts, and the score flipped to a positive 56. That human interaction, that personalization, our people are the secret sauce is a term that is used over and over, but it is so true. And so when you think about
Mm,
AI, we're all getting impacted by it right now, and there's great ways to use it. There's dangerous ways to use it. There's lazy ways to use it. But you really need to think about where does it add value to the customer experience along that journey. Where does it make sense? But don't lose touch with that personal touch. And then the other principle that I really brought forth to
hmm
Midco that was critical was this idea of delight. We all read the books of
mm,
Ritz Carlton, oh, Joshy the Giraffe. We read everything about goes on with Nordstrom's, and we put them on that high standard. But there's a reason that Ritz Carlton says every employee gets $2,500 to make right for a customer. They don't do that necessarily for the customers. Yes, that's important one at a time, but that's not scalable in our world. They do it because it makes the employees feel pride. And so in those moments where you know that no one remembers normal and you need to seize that moment and turn the anxiety into absolute pleasure for customers, while that's great for that customer, and they may go viral, you never know. They may put something on X, they may put something out there. Um, it's about the pride value internally. It's about other employees seeing that what happened and recognizing that they can be empowered to take the customer experience to the next level. So there's not any person that is immune from being responsible from the customer experience if they just look across four basic principles. And so, as you can't just communicate that once. It has to be embedded in your DNA. So I'm sure there's people at Midco that still today think, what were those four principles? What was he talking about? I still see people in my career that I cross paths with from Midco that remember them vividly because that's what we're governed by.
Yeah, I think you've hit a really a good mix of points there. I think that the AI thing, I like how you said that there's lazy ways to use it, there's dangerous ways to use it, and there's good ways to use it. And I think that's very true for all tools,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that applies to hammers as much as it
Hmm.
does to AI, right?
True.
Um, so that's what I like to think about a little bit too, is that, there's some things in CX that are changing all the
Hmm.
time, but there's some things that are timeless too, right? There's always new technology coming out. The human touch is always going to be
Yep.
valuable, right? So these two things, I think that there's a lot of tension between them, especially recently. There's a lot of anxiety about people having their jobs replaced, people being, having their jobs taken, being replaced, and so on. But I mean, this is a story as old as time, right? I
Hmm.
mean, just tools,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
If you break it down like that, and and regardless of how great the tools are throughout history, as you said, you've seen these
Hmm.
waves. That there's all this vaporware, there's all this like hype going on, and then there's like a few things that work really well, but the human element is consistent throughout,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so I think that it's so important for people to just kind of to remember, to
Yeah.
not forget, and to take a deep breath and kind of think about for a
Hmm.
second, because it is easy to get overwhelmed. But I love your 4 points, and I think um, the especially in the AI era, if I can say
Yeah.
that, in this world, there's all this like low quality AI content. I'm guilty of like doing that a little bit myself, although I'm starting to be much more sensitive to it. I notice when I see a post in LinkedIn that's like, hey, that kind of smells like Chat GPT, you know. Um, and I'm taking notes and trying to be very careful about putting the human
Yeah.
element in
Hmm.
myself. But I think against this backdrop, basically, I think that the human element is highlighted more,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
When somebody shows their humanity, when you get a personal touch in a world full of automation and AI, like that stands out more. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. I think about listening to our agents, both in the technical space and general and billing, and I've listened to, you know, uh, calls that are, we're looking to bring on a new CCAS system, and it has all the bells and whistles, and you sit in those presentations, and they will listen to some of your calls, so they want to provide you a presentation, and they get the context, and they think they get it right. And there's nothing more blood curdling than when you hear a chat bot or a bot try and empathize. Because I don't care what you do for the rest of time, you will not get a chat bot. You will not be able to automate empathy. It is something that as a human being, it has to be authentic, it has to be genuine. And you can pick up on that right away. And it's the same thing when you see somebody not understand context for what they're writing. You can pick it up, like you mentioned, immediately on LinkedIn. Yeah, okay, I see that. I could have done that too in 2 seconds. That's the lazy way. But it's that empathy,
Mm-hmm.
it's that genuine caring that I spoke to one of those 4 points about that detectable human fingerprint is that genuine authenticity of the relationship that builds loyalty. So you said sales, yes, sales is driving the revenue, absolutely. We're securing the revenue, we're making sure that we're upselling, we're driving MRR and that growth in the business in that category. We're driving it all the time. But it's that the technology side is necessary. It because listen, it's if you don't get on board, it will overwhelm you and it'll pass you very quickly. It is hard to contain. It's like I always think about water. Water gets into everything at some point. There's no stopping it. It will always do that. The same thing with the internet. Like trying to lock it down forever, it gets in at some point. I think the same thing with AI. You have to be very smart and have your ear to the ground and your finger on the pulse to know when you get in at the right moment. I think about as we go through this process of introducing AI, what is it there for? You mentioned that, it's not really there to replace jobs, and that's it shouldn't how you think about it. Some people do, but really what it's there is to take your people and make them more effective. Still let them focus on the things they do really well, the engagement, the empathy. But how do you make AI listen for resonance, listen for certain keywords, and then dig into your own knowledge base so that you get a lot of consistency out of that? So now you're feeding your employees great answers, not only great but consistent answers. And so you can build on that, and then use the algorithms to make everything smarter in your organization. Because what you're doing is you're letting your people, instead of being worried about how many calls they take per day, they only now have to worry about how rich is that experience because AI has made them more effective in some cases without them even knowing it. Because now your first contact resolution goes up, your repeats go down, you're providing a richer experience, you have repeat buyers, all those things happen if you leverage the technology for the right reasons.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that it's certainly very powerful, and I think having a clear sense of why you're introducing a tool, what you expect to achieve from it,
Mhm.
where you're not going to use it, right? Where you're not going to deploy AI is almost as important.
Yes.
Um, and I think one of the things that, thinking about this kind of context, this environment, one of the things that keeps coming up in my mind is the importance of knowledge management.
Hmm.
Because, with AI, it's entirely dependent on its access to your internal knowledge,
Yeah.
right? Your knowledge base, your contact data, right? And that's going to really be the key factor in the quality of responses. If it's
Yeah.
agent assist
Hmm.
or if it's direct self serve for customers. Um, so how do you think about this kind of increasing pressure on knowledge management
Yeah.
in this background?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a I'm a huge honk for experiential learning. Because if you work anywhere around customer support, in frontline organizations, it comes with high churn. It is an environment, a work environment that has a lot of churn, and so you're always, swimming upstream on this idea of proficiency. And knowledge bases, knowledge management is the key to everything. Keeping updated, all those things. But from a training perspective, proficiency perspective, and so many times when we're training our employees, we always teach them how to raise their hand. That's not what you want to do. You want people to learn how to fish. You want people to learn how to go there and build their own proficiency. And knowledge is the key to that. If you do not have a strong knowledge management system or base to work from that is regularly kept up and managed and monitored, it's as important part of the organization as anything else you do, um, your employees will fail. Your customers will fail. The magic to a great knowledge management system isn't just what your agents can grasp, but it's like it's one of those kind of lazy susans where you can spin it around to the customer in an online support perspective or the agent, and they're getting the same answers, and they're searching, and their reputation building on that as well is also feeding the agents, as is what it's feeding to the customers. So to me, knowledge management kind of governs the entire universe of a great customer experience. It's at the core. And if you don't have it, and I know organizations that don't, we currently use a wiki page to manage some of our knowledge. Well, that takes a lot of human interaction and administration. How do we get to
Hmm.
something more sophisticated where it's a true kind of KMS system where it's really building on itself, and it's got the reputation modeling, the content is rich, it's pulling from multiple places. Because to be honest with you, many agents in today's world, even with our own technology that we launch in our own sites, they will search ChatGPT first before our internal wiki system because the information on ChatGPT is better than what we have. How do we build and incorporate that so it's in our universe? Because you have to be careful when you're going external, and those mechanisms begin to go search other things that have no relevance to what you're doing. That's dangerous. So how you just got to manage it internally. But to me, it's the key. Human beings have to run it. They have to empathize. But man, without knowledge, you're nothing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's really you're touching on a good thread there. I think you mentioned before also about, if customers are frustrated, they might get on X, they might
Hmm.
get on,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, they might go somewhere and kind of complain publicly.
Hmm.
And so it kind of, you mentioned also like water, it kind of gets everywhere,
Yeah.
right? This voice of the customer in data is not only in our systems, it's out there on
Yeah.
the internet as well,
Hmm.
right? For
Yep.
everybody else to see.
Absolutely.
And so there's this there's the kind of the world that we control. There's the internal systems, and then there's the external systems as well, which we don't control, right? And there's, maybe it's ChatGPT out there,
Yeah.
picking
Hmm.
up answers from who knows where, or it's people posting on LinkedIn, in a place where your company can't see it,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I think that that's a reality that a lot of people just try to ignore
Hmm.
or they try
Yeah.
to
At
pretend it
their own
doesn't
peril.
exist maybe, right? Because it's kind of, you can't really get a grasp on
Mhm.
it, right? I mean, there's some kind of like brand reputation management system, there's like some things around that side of it, but I feel like the connecting back to the AI point again with like, people searching on
Mhm.
ChatGPT, even if
Mhm.
they're your own agents, they're going there to look for information,
Yep.
right? There's been several kind of news stories in the last few months and last year about, you know AI hallucination,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Where
Mhm.
it really confidently puts forth an answer. It might even say like cite a source or something, and then it's just total baloney, right? It's
Exactly.
totally nonsense. Um, so I think, you know, like if you see that people inside your
Mhm.
organization are using ChatGPT, or let's say a
Mhm.
hypothetical,
Mhm.
company out there, that there's kind of this shadow IT,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
There's the IT that you don't control, that, people are using their own applications, their own,
Mhm.
note-taking tools, whatever it is, right? And then that should be, hopefully there's enough transparency
Yeah.
so you can like have a
Mhm.
conversation about this,
Mhm.
but if they're out using ChatGPT and so on, there should be some kind of a awareness that,
Yes.
look, we're not providing a
Mhm.
tool that our team
Yep.
needs, right? And we need to have some capability. There's a gap between our
Yeah.
capability that we have and what our team needs, and then, maybe that points the way.
Yeah.
What do you think about kind of assessing the team needs
Mm.
and kind of, you know, filling those gaps, so to
Yeah,
speak?
absolutely. So I like to think of knowledge management as a giant ecosystem. And it
Hmm.
has to be, you have to be prepared and accepting of the idea that it needs to be open source with some type of governing mechanism. The context to the answer, of what you got, did it fit, and reputation management. So there's got to be a blend of all of that. But you can't just restrict. You can't just close up every one of your walls and say we're going to manage knowledge right here, because you are missing everything that's going on the outside world, both from a reputation modeling that customers are saying, other industry components are doing. You're missing all of that. You just can't close up shop. So you do need to open
Hmm.
things up. I wouldn't say that you open all the windows, but I think there's some definite screen doors you open up so you can hear what's going on. You can take in some other content,
Right.
but you make it known that your organization has one goal, and that's to provide a great customer and at the same time an employee experience. And so we are willing and open to listen, but we all have this common thread that we don't want hallucination. We want to give the right answer. And it's going to tell itself when we get the data. Our first contact resolution, all of our CSAT, NPS scores are going to be the tell that what we're saying, what we're providing is working. So this idea of this governing mechanism, you need experts within your organization that have their ear to the ground, but also their eye on the prize, where they're seeing content coming in externally. Agents are sharing it, like, "Hey, I found this great article about what's going on with, the latest router in home that Eero's just launched, and what do ours do? And let's get the specs and let's look at them, and then let's share that with the customers to show that our device is better." We wouldn't have got that if we closed up shop. So competitive analysis, all those things can enter the knowledge as long as you open the screens and let it in. But then govern it,
Mhm.
and you have this unified type of approach where everyone tries to row in the same direction. And I think that comes down to a really strong change management type of program or ethos in your organization, that everybody understands why the screens are open. Everybody understands why we have a governing body to make sure that that knowledge is rich internally as well as for customers. And then as you rally people around that, it just builds momentum. And so, again, it's an ecosystem. You got to let everything in and then learn how to cultivate and grow it. And that can make a good knowledge management environment.
Yeah, I really like how you tied that together there. I think that really makes a lot of sense. This idea of the ecosystem, and there's some very important relationships inside of that, between people and information and these different systems. Um, I wanted to talk to you a little bit and get your thoughts on, the data side of things. So
Mm,
if we can call knowledge management, let's put that in a bucket. Let's call
yeah.
that
Hmm.
content, just for the sake of argument. But there's also data, and I like to separate content and data. Whereas content is more words or maybe images and video and
Hmm.
sound potentially, and data is more about metrics and numbers,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
In just for sake of argument. And if you think about the data about the content, the data about the customer experience, the data about the interactions. It could be call volume. There's a whole bunch of,
Hmm.
there's
Yeah.
a whole, pantheon of
Hmm.
different
Yeah.
metrics out there. Um, but when you think about this and some of these challenges that we mentioned in the beginning, right? Connecting support to revenue,
Hmm.
connecting
Hmm.
support to retention, connecting support to upsell. How do you think about kind of tying the data
Yeah.
together and making the case based on the data.
You bet. Well, I've learned anything in my long career as be a truth seeker. And what I define by that is don't settle for the first answer you get in data. Because if you've been in many presentations, you learn that people can make data tell any story they want to. Whether it's right or wrong, they can spin it and churn it. And so I think the idea of having secondary and tertiary type of data elements that are supporting what you're trying to go after are critical. So I think of, yes, service level is important, how quickly you answer the call. I also think first contact resolutions a critical in any industry, because at the end of the day, the customer wants it fixed right the first time. And I don't care what you're in, that's what they want. So FCR is a critical element because things like service level, they do serve a purpose. They tell you how your organization needs to be constructed, how big it needs to be, and what the levels of thresholds of pain customers are willing to go through to get support. Once they get there, then it becomes about the interaction, then it becomes about the information. So things that drive first contact resolution are certainly knowledge. They're certainly training, proficiency of your agents, quality of your product. Those things drive FCR, which drives a great customer experience, right? Because the idea that the greatest customer experience is the one you don't have, that it just works, right? But one of
Right.
the other interesting elements is, a lot of companies, when they really go to drive self-help and lose that detectable human fingerprint I talked about earlier, they do it in ways that are somewhat unhealthy to the relationship. They do it in a deflective passion. We've all been on an IVR where it tries to make you do text until it basically you have no more pulse. It will work you and work you like, are you sure you don't want to do SMS? Are you sure you don't want me to text you the result? I'm like, no, I need to speak to a human being. But one of the interesting things that we've seen is the whole concept of auto pay, right? Auto pay is almost everywhere. And I think it scares some consumers, but the whole idea of auto pay, when I really breaks down the customer experience, is I look at auto pay in our space as customers that don't pay their bill, non-pays, right? But customers that get onto auto pay will call you 5 times less. They will also go in a non-pay environment, not 5 times less. Actually, 5 times they'll call, and then 9 times they'll go into non-pay. But that whole idea of friction is it. When you input auto pay the right way, you remove friction. When you have a
Right.
clean IVR that gets the customer where they need to go in the right way, and you understand what that customer is looking for, it removes friction. When you provide chat, when you provide social, when you provide the IVR automation, all those components of interaction and multimodality, you're allowing the customer to choose the path that they feel has the less amount of friction. So that
Right.
diversification is critical. All those pieces as well are super, super important. And so when I think about the ideas of automation and all those things that come with it, yeah, it's great. It's part of how we have to evolve. But you know what? One of the things we really believe in too is meet them where they are and make sure they have the right technology to meet their needs for their engagement and make it simple. If you can do those things
Hmm.
and always strive to do those things and never settle, and the data tells you it works, then you've been the truth seeker. You're never settling, you're always looking to improve. And then I think the other magic is any organization that has a fantastic data analyst that understands the context of CX, they can go find every metadata element you could ever imagine to make you the most powerful machine in the organization. When you can look at NPS results at a brand level and be able to cascade that back down to a specific thing that you did in a policy, that's kind of that's nirvana from a CX standpoint. So data is critical because it makes you smarter. It's where you can really turn the engine up and be proactive and really drive great
Hmm.
CX experiences.
Yeah, I love that example you gave. I think it's really exciting to think about, you know, attribution,
Hmm.
right? And I think, there's this big opportunity today if it's connecting an NPS score or a CSAT score to a specific line in a policy, right? Or if it's, connecting revenue
Hmm.
to support interaction, right? Customer, customer Bob, he got a phone call that on, the April 5th, and, then this happened, right?
Yeah.
And now he's, subscribed at a higher tier,
Hmm.
right? Or he renewed his plan or something, right? And like the attribution component there, I think has been missing or
Yeah.
maybe overlooked,
Hmm.
or it's just, it wasn't part of support's responsibilities. Um, but I'm starting to kind of hypothesize about this idea of like the support qualified lead
Mm.
or the support assisted upsell,
Yes.
right? So there's I want to kind of, make a new metric here if I can, and like kind of establish this, because if there's a metric that people have in their mind
Hmm.
that like it's
Hmm.
possible to measure this,
Yeah.
well, now there's an opportunity. And then support is in the conversation with revenue, right? It's not just the loss
Yep.
part of the business, it's the
Hmm.
profit part of the business now. And
Absolutely.
that really, that's like a catapult, right?
Oh,
That just, it's huge leverage.
100%. I mean, in our world, we live in a subscription world from a revenue standpoint. So we're governed by ARPU, right? It's just we're looking for average revenue per unit all the time, and we're going through this. And it would be so simple, and it's something I'm probably going to walk away from this conversation and try and figure out how to do right away, is to be able to tie my highest performers in CSAT, both from their interaction, transaction NPS, as well as where they drove brand, and actually measure their impact to ARPU over time for that customer base. And and one thing, if you do this long enough, you learn how to trust your gut. It's really because you've seen it. I guarantee you it will be higher. And then you do get a seat at the big table, right? You're not at Thanksgiving sitting over the kids. You get a seat at the big table and you get to really talk about, these agent assisted upsells, these opportunities that our agents build. They aren't just given. They build the conversation. I think we
Hmm.
we spoke just a moment ago about the importance of data, and it is fundamentally critical to what you do. But you cannot just put on those blinders because really your most important resource is your agents. It's that it's what are they hearing, what are they seeing, what are they feeling that will also support what you're doing with that data. I had an opportunity while working at Comcast, and Comcast is, yes, the largest broadband provider on the planet. Incredible organization. When they move an inch, the rest of the industry moves like 2 feet just to catch up. They're that big, and we had an opportunity to deploy Net Promoter System for Comcast several years ago, back in I think it was 2015 and 16, and they hadn't had it in place before. And so when we looked at it, it really came down to what are our agents hearing? Like, what are the main frustration points that the customers are hearing? And you will unearth policies that will shake you to your core. But the thing I've learned about policies and processes, none of them are ever implemented with bad intent. They just become something. They become the 800-pound
Mm-hmm.
gorilla in the corner that everybody's afraid to deal with because they don't want to go talk to the CFO. Because if we fix that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's going to damage things. But when you spin it the right way, we had not, our agents were really hearing from customers that, we always like to drive self-installation. There's nothing better than when a customer can come in and pick up a router, run home, plug it in, and it works. Because I don't have to send a $200 truck roll to install just a simple piece of equipment. And what we were finding was our network wasn't quite ready for it. It worked 70% of the time. But the 30% it
Mm-hmm.
didn't, we had a policy in place years ago, or Comcast did, that every time it failed, when a customer got that router home that we said would work and it failed, we they would charge them $90 for a service call. And we would get out there and the
Mm.
and the technician would find out, oh yeah, that was on Comcast, but they wouldn't waive the $90. So our agents
Mm.
discovered this policy that was nationwide for, close to 40,000 employees that were doing this and 28 million customers. And we went to the CFO and said, "Hey, listen, here's the deal. Pain point. Agents identified it. This will help both the employee and the customer experience. Let's fix this policy." So we sat down and built an ROI model and found that there was $300 million of revenue that was happening because of this. And we had to prove out that because we're going to remove the friction, we're going to increase NPS, and we're not going to roll trucks anymore. We're going to save that money. And it was just, it took agents and data to convince the CFO that it's the right thing to do. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you can't forget that the data is critical, but agents validate. Humans validate that that in
Right.
fact is true because
Right.
they have the context.
Wow, what a powerful story. I mean, I think, you know, it really highlights a lot of the things that we've been talking about, and I think that that is just a great it's a great way to kind of cap this
Mhm.
episode off a little bit here. I think you know, the human element, it's not only important for customers, it's important internally as well,
Mhm.
right? And I think that even if you're a CFO, let's imagine, a ruthless, profit oriented CFO, you're still gonna talk to people. You're still
Yeah.
gonna listen.
Hmm.
You still want to hear some anecdotes. You want to hear from people who are maybe experts in this particular
Yeah.
subject. And then you're going to add that to all the data and
Hmm.
all the numbers and everything, right? Um, I think that kind of that story is a great example. Also, I think of internal salesmanship
Yeah. Hmm.
and just general business acumen. And I think those are two areas that you know maybe come a little bit more naturally to folks in the marketing department or in the sales department, for example, potentially product department, obviously in
Hmm.
management. I
Yeah.
think, but I think that those are areas where um, everybody has an opportunity to brush
Hmm.
up and get better. And stories like yours, I think, are really helpful for illustrating how exactly to do that. Um, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
Before we sign off here, I wanted to ask you, do you have anything that you would like to shout out or any initiatives you've got going on right now? Um, and then just, a word of advice for anybody out there trying to build their skills, build their career.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I think that in the space where we're living in now, with technology moving as fast as it is, you know, y- there can be executives and leaders that get super excited about deploying it. And I think one thing that we have to remember is that change, even this transformative speed of change, happens not to corporations, but to people. And I think we have to really make sure that when we're going through this change, we're really building the right framework in the organization to do it. Because if I know one thing about business, especially in the U.S. and my space, we have a little bit of ADHD. We will drive change, we will do it, but we also have the habit of going back to what was comfortable. And if you're really going to drive
Hmm.
transformative change, you have to support people and reinforce the why. You have to reinforce why we did this and build it. And I think we, just in leadership in general, not just for CX, but in everything, is that we have to give people that space to change. And you may think I'm just speaking about employees. I'm not. Customers are at the sharp end of the spear of our change. And I think we have to
Mm.
prepare them just as we do our employees. Technology moving fast internally moves just as fast, if not faster, for people that don't know what we do. And so caring for customer change as critical as it is for employee change. And so if you're a leader out there and you're thinking about driving CX initiatives or driving technology changes, I'm excited for you. But take a deep breath and really think about the group and the universe that you're impacting and think about ways that you can help them through that. I think that will be maybe a measure of your success as you come out of the other end, that not only do your employees do it, but your customers want it more.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cory, great. That has been it's been really been nice to talk to you. Those are some great thoughts, great stories. I think we could talk for another hour or two here if we really got going. But um, yeah, thanks again. And yeah, is there any final words or final thoughts for the listeners today?
I will say this: you and I have a shared experience in life, and that is important. When you really get to meet people like yourself, and you scratch under the surface a little bit, you can relate. And I think that's something that a lot of people lose sight of. It can't be purely transactional. Um,
Right.
I look forward to the day that I see you back domestically here in the U.S. because I know we'll connect in person. It's been a pleasure to meet you. Really, I love your remit. I love what you're all about and doing. And anytime you want to talk, just reach out.
Cory, thanks a lot. That sounds great. Hopefully, we can meet up sometime soon.
You bet.
All right, everybody. That's all for today on the CX Files. Thank you and tune in next time.
Great. Thank you, Ben.